them know. They got the key from the mannequin, right?
When they reached the target apartment, an agent phoned their contact inside.
FBI, we're here.
The contact was escorted out of the building.
They have the inside, eh? They have an inside, right?
When they made it to the room where Jones was sleeping, he was gone. So was his gun. Tension mounted as SWAT began searching the rest of the apartment.
Get your hands up, man. Get your hands up. Come on, get up.
That's it?
Get up.
They found and removed 2 other residents. Every room was cleared, except one, the bathroom.
Jones, you know you're in there. Come out. Put your hands up, Jones. That's him. Let's go.
To the team's relief, Jones was unarmed and surrendered without a fight. The manhunt was over.
Get up, sit up.
Agents searched for his weapon. They discovered it in a closet, its firing pin broken. Had the gun been functional, the arrest might not have gone so smoothly. Jones was immediately charged with probation violation and later for the bank robbery. On February 25th, 1998, the trial of Rashid Jones and LaFawn Bobbitt began. But it would not be an easy case. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jim Nelson and his prosecution team were unable to use any of the people in the bank as witnesses.
None of them could really testify for us because the guard was blind as a result of being wounded. One teller was dead. Another one had never had the opportunity to even turn around to see anything. And a third employee was unable to testify because she didn't see anything. She was under a desk during most of the robbery.
Nelson found a way to deal with the lack of witnesses by commissioning a digital recreation of the crime.
We had to stand in for them digitally and show the jury what happened inside that bank. We were the witnesses' voice to the jury during the trial so that they could be involved and experience the agony of the victims, experience the moment of the bank robbery. And that would give them not only the true feeling of what went on in the bank, but the true carnage and intense.
After hearing 6 days of testimony, convicted both gunmen on all charges. Assistant U.S. Attorney Nicholas Altamari.
In the trial, they sat there smug as all day. And it wasn't until after they were convicted that you could really see them start to worry, because then it was about them. Then they were worried.
Bobbitt and Jones were each sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Jermaine Sims, who purchased 2 of the weapons used in the robbery, was convicted on conspiracy, accessory before the fact of murder, and several weapons violations. He, too, was sentenced to life parole. As the victims and their families continue to heal, they and the city of Richmond know that Jones, Bobbitt, and Sims will never be a threat to anyone again.
this gang was getting home. It was almost as if they were laying down the gauntlet, Clint Eastwood style, and asking us to make it. And we did.
Every Vietnamese store owner in the Canal Street area tried to pay extortion rate.
Darrell Whiting, whose nickname was God, used his position to influence young people and get them involved in the drug traffic.
I consider myself the person is trying to get the gang.
Chicago in the 1920s, a city synonymous with corruption, bootlegging, gangland murder, and Scarface Al Capone, by far the most powerful crime boss in a city teeming with gangsters. The local forces of American justice, police, politicians, and judges were in pockets. They had no interest in busting his gang. They were on the payroll. The passage of the 18th Amendment in 1920, better known as Prohibition, had sparked a brutal turf war among gangsters across the country to supply booze to a thirsty public. A war the Capone gang eventually won in Chicago. Anyone who crossed Capone, gangsters who squealed to the cops, politicians in the rival camp, even reporters who knew too much, all risked gang rubouts. Or as the gangsters put it, they were taken for a ride. Capone's deadly influence peaked in 1929 with the infamous
Al Capone
massacre. His target was Bugs Moran, leader of the last gang still challenging him to run Chicago. Moran had been raiding Capone's beer trucks and bombing his restaurants. On the night before Valentine's Day, Moran received a call informing him that his men had hijacked a truckload of Capone's whiskey en route from Detroit. Beer would be delivered to Moran's warehouse the next morning. Bugs arrived late and saw that 6 of his boys had been met instead by what looked like several uniformed, often plainclothes cops. Assuming that the police had busted the delivery, and walked away. A lucky break. The men were in fact imposters, members of the Capone gang disguised as cops. Inside the warehouse, they lined 6 members of the Moran gang and 1 innocent bystander up and machine-gunned them all to death. When Moran learned about the massacre, Capone killed like that. Was conveniently out of town at his mansion on Palm Island, Florida. Pursued both by a Chicago grand jury and Bugs Moran, Capone arranged to be arrested in Philadelphia for carrying a concealed weapon. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison, the safest place for him to plot his next murder. To this day, there is a popular belief that one celebrated gangbuster, Ness, led the charge to put Capone away for good. Ness and a band of federal prohibition agents, whom the press dubbed the Untouchables, did participate in a many-pronged assault on Capone, an assault that broke new ground in the nation's gang-busting efforts. But behind the scenes, the credit goes to a handful of private citizens, known as the Secret Six, or the crime criminals, who took it on themselves to outsmart Capone. They were the real gangbusters and the brains behind the Untouchables. By the mid-1920s, Chicago was paying a stiff price for its gang violence and political corruption. Word was Chicago was no longer being considered as a site for manufacturing plants and corporate headquarters. Not only that, news reports about rampant gang murders were scaring away tourists. One of the crusaders was Charles Dawes, a wealthy Chicago banker and vice president under Calvin Coolidge. Dawes realized that local law enforcement was either too weak or too corrupt to bust Capone. So in 1928, Dawes went straight to his boss. He convinced Coolidge to authorize the Internal Revenue Bureau to investigate Capone for income tax evasion. When Herbert Hoover took office the following year, the Secret Six persuaded him to continue the campaign to get Capone. It was the first major effort by the federal government to intervene in a local gang crisis. Back in Chicago, word of the private efforts leaked to Capone. the gangster summoned the leader of the Secret Six, an engineer named Robert Isham Randolph, to his office in the Lexington Hotel. The businessman surrendered his pistol to Capone. Gang leader served Randolph a beer.
They discussed politics. Capone asked him, why are you after me? And basically Randolph said, because you're bad for business, Al, and we're going to get you.
Randolph set up a bogus speakeasy to gather intelligence on the Capone gang.
The bootleggers came in, and the bartender who was under the employ 6 would pay for information and feed it directly to the federal government.
It was Randolph who proposed to the U.S. Attorney in Chicago, George Johnson, that he set up a squad of so-called untouchables.
He was the one that had the idea that we have to get some honest prohibition agents, some people who don't have any political ties, who will go and do a detached investigating.
Randolph suggested that a federal agent named Elliot Ness was the right man for the job. Ness and his men were directed to destroy Capone breweries and confiscate his beer trucks. These efforts did hurt Capone, and they were good publicity to rally the public behind the gangbusters and against the gangsters.
The problem in those days with Capone was Capone had a fairly positive image. I mean, after all, he was the guy that was supplying the beer. He was the guy that in the 1930s was running the soup kitchens.
I once were Al Capone wrote to my house on 935 South State Street, Wayward Lee.
In the midst of the Great Depression, when the federal government was short on money for everything, including law enforcement, it was the secret paid for private undercover agents to infiltrate the Capone gang, in helping the feds trace the paper and money trail of the Capone organization. One Internal Revenue agent used Secret Six by gaudy gangster clothes and rent a room at the Lexington Hotel. In the hotel lobby and eavesdrop. Several of the private gangbusters wanted known that they were bankrolling this secret war against Capone. Among contributors was the president of Sears Roebuck and Company, Julius Rosenwald. Another more public member of the Crusaders was Colonel Robert McCormick, publisher of the Chicago Tribune. McCormick joined the group after one of his reporters was murdered by the Capone gang. It was his newspaper that first used the phrase public enemy in April 1930 to describe the Capone gang. Capone soon became known as public enemy number 1. By this time, the Internal Revenue agents and the Secret Six were closing in on Capone. Bookkeepers were prepared to testify that their boss had failed to pay $215,000 in income taxes from 1924 to 1929. But to convict public enemy number 1, U.S. Attorney Johnson needed help from the Secret Six to keep his witnesses safe from gang intimidation or murder. American justice did not yet have a federal witness protection program. So the Secret Six paid to send the 2 bookkeepers on vacation and return them safely for trial.
Had not the Secret Six hid these guys out and protected them, Capone would have probably seen to it that some gangsters took him for a ride. In other words, wiped him out.
Capone was convicted of income tax evasion on October 20, 1931, and sentenced to 11 years in prison. It was a victory for American justice because it could never have been achieved without the efforts of public and private gangbusters. While waiting to be sent to federal prison in Atlanta, Capone himself acknowledged, the Secret Six, the rackets, they've licked me.
Anyone gets Woodward gets this stuff.
Capone's conviction did not eliminate gang violence from Chicago. Far from it. The repeal of prohibition gave new criminal opportunities. Gambling and drug running replaced bootlegging, and the next generation of gangs was born. Like the old Capone and Bugs Moran gangs of the 20s and 30s, these new gangs fought bloody turf battles. In response, the gangbusters would develop new tools and strategies to fight them.
Pause moving and storage.
We just sold our house.
Congratulations.
We have 2 weeks to move.
We'll deliver a few containers.
Our new party.
No problem. You can store things with us while you're between homes.
We might need help.
We'll your trust?
We'll be staying at my brother's.
Well, that sounds...
He has kids of his own.
Well...
5 of them.
Well...
Good
Trust
luck.
us for local and long-distance moving and store at our store. Moving and storage solved.
It's when word. I have a structured settlement. I need cash now. Cause JG Wentworth ain't selling cash now. I have a nutty, but I need cash now. Cause JG Wentworth ain't selling cash now. Cash now. Cause JG Wentworth ain't selling cash now.
Before we got the Sun Center, we almost never used.
If it was sunny out, we'd be inside.
Because it was just so hot.
It was nuts.
Now that we're at the Sun Center, more time outdoors. Our real friends actually think we spent a fortune on it.
Use the patio. The Sunsetter is hands down the best decision we ever made. It gets us out.
Isn't it time you got outside under a beautiful Sunsetter retractable awning? Prices start at under $800. But when you call now for your free awning idea kit, include a $200 savings certificate so you can get your Sunsetter for as little as $5.99.
The kids are loving it. It's nice to get outside and get some fresh air and not be cooped up indoors all the time. Under the Sunsetter awning, it cuts the UV rays.
You just press that button and you get as much shade or as little shade as you want.
It cools the inside of the house too, so we're saving money with the AC. We checked on the quality of the fabrics, the motor, the warranty. We got the wind sensor. Sometimes a storm kicks up, so it closes itself in high wind.
They sent free fabric swatches so you can actually feel what you're getting.
We've had this thing for 2 or 3 years now, and it still just looks like brand new.
We honestly feel that it was an incredible value.
We're saving money, we're getting outdoors.
It really has changed our lives.
It's not too late to enjoy a beautiful Sunsetter this season and $200 savings. Call or visit Sunsetter Awning Idea Kit, plus this $200 savings certificate. So a Sunsetter for as little as $5.99. Call 1-800-881-1147. 1-800-881-1147.
Okay, honey, you play with your monkey while I get your brother cleaned up.
What did I tell you? So 11:20 leave your house. Leave the house at 11:20.
Irreplaceable monkey protection. Detergent alone doesn't kill bacteria, but adding new Lysol laundry sanitizer has 99.9% of bacteria with 0% bleach. Lysol, what it takes to protect. Hate trying to score deals at discount stores, sifting through racks, searching for sizes, finally getting fed up? That's why I go online to ThredUp. It's the world's largest online thrift store. Gap jeans for $16.99, Coach bags for $82, JQ shoes for $52. Score! It's deals on designer brands so good. Even stylish friends are saying, score! Items are like new and up to 90% off. Dresses,
and I didn't invite my boyfriend
tops,
to my aunt's party because they
I
don't
just
like
pop
him.
in the brand love, along with my size, the season's
They
hottest
don't like him,
colors,
so
and
I invited
score!
my older friends.
You
They
can return
around my
anything
aunt's
you
party.
like
They
because with
same
thousands
age
of new
and
items
stuff.
posting every day,
So he followed us all the way to my friend's house.
$28.99, Zara or H&M for $12.99. It's never hard to find your next score. Find your score today at ThredUp.com. They'll even take 40% off your first order.
Since the days of authorities have learned that they must do more than put the leader behind bars. They must destroy the ring down to its lowest ranks. A lesson that gangbusters in Boston took to heart when they want to take down a brutal drug ring headed by this man, Daryl Whiting, known to his fellow gangbangers simply as God.
It's not that, I wanted them to call me God. They just call me G. Certain individuals call me God. We refer to each other as God. It's just something like that. It's not that I was on some type of trip or anything like that. It was just what I was involved with.
Whiting muscled his way into Boston's cocaine trade in 1986. He transplanted his gang, known as the New York Boys, from Queens, New York, to the Roxbury section of Boston. By 1989, Whiting and his drawing heat from federal gangbusters, including prosecutor Paul Kelly.
We went to the Boston police and literally asked them to tell us what they believe to be the most significant gang violence problem in the city, known as the New York Boys, and Darrell Whiting, their leader, as the principal.
In less than 3 years, Whiting had built his gang, a handful of members, into a cocaine empire, complete with lieutenants, couriers, and security forces. At any given time, there was
where he could sell drugs out of one building, store drugs in another building, but enough of an area where he could have a security force, law enforcement, or watch the grounds for rival gangs and successfully trade and sell his drugs.
So powerful was the